The rain started before the lights died, but Mason Reed had already stopped believing in signs. He walked through the Riverside trailer park with a plastic grocery bag cutting into his fingers, 3 items inside that wouldn't fix anything but might buy his mother one more comfortable night. Bread she wouldn't eat, soup she couldn't keep down, cough drops that wouldn't touch the pain growing in her liver like a fist closing around hope. 16 years old, and Mason had learned that hope was a luxury. The kind of thing you saw in other people's windows when you walked past houses with porches that didn't sag and doors that locked properly. His trailer sat at the end of Cottonwood Lane, where the gravel turned to mud and the streetlights had been broken so long nobody bothered reporting them anymore. The wind picked up, shoving rain sideways into his face. Mason pulled his hoodie tighter and kept walking. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He didn't need to check it to know what it said. Dr. Patricia Morrison had called 3 times today. The hospital only called that often when the numbers were bad, when the treatment wasn't working anymore, when they needed to have conversations about next steps that really meant final steps. Mason's father had died 5 years ago in an industrial accident at the meatpacking plant. OSHA violations stacked up like cordwood, but the company settled for $15,000 and a promise that the Reed family wouldn't pursue further legal action. His mother signed because she was drowning in medical debt from Mason's sister, Emma, 2 years old when bacterial meningitis took her so fast Mason barely remembered her voice, only the sound of his mother crying through walls. Now Sarah Reed was dying too. Stage 4 liver cancer. The kind doctors described in gentle tones that made every word feel like a shovel hitting dirt. Mason learned not to ask how long because the answer kept getting shorter. Lightning split the sky and thunder followed close enough to vibrate in his chest. The storm wasn't supposed to hit until midnight, but weather didn't care about forecasts any more than cancer cared about good people. Mason turned onto the main road that cut through the park. Trailers lined both sides, aluminum boxes with peeling paint and tarps held down by cinder blocks. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a baby cried. Somewhere a television shouted through thin walls. Then every light went out at once. Not gradually, not flickering, just gone. Darkness slammed down like a curtain dropping on a stage. The hum of electricity that Mason never noticed until it vanished left behind a silence so complete he could hear the rain hitting individual puddles. Someone shouted. A car alarm went off 3 streets over and cut out. A generator coughed to life and died. Mason stopped in the middle of the road, grocery bag swinging. His eyes adjusted slowly. Lightning provided brief snapshots of the world. Trailers, trees bending, water running in rivers down the pavement, and something else. A shape, small, standing in the road about 50 feet ahead where the water pooled deepest. Mason squinted through the rain. Too small for an adult. A kid maybe, but no kid should be outside in this. Lightning flashed again, and he saw clearly. Bare legs, no shoes. A thin jacket soaked through, maybe 3 years old, maybe younger. Alone. Mason's stomach dropped. His first thought was automatic and stupid. Where's your mom? Like moms didn't vanish. Like people didn't disappear in towns where nobody asked questions because asking meant getting involved, and involvement meant risk. The child stood perfectly still in the rainwater, up to their ankles, face turned upward, as if waiting for something to fall from the sky besides weather. Mason dropped the grocery bag and ran. His boots splashed through flooded asphalt. His hoodie was useless within seconds. Rain hit his face so hard he had to squint to see. The child didn't move, didn't run, just stood there with the kind of stillness that comes from being too afraid to know what to do next. Mason slowed as he got close, hands out, voice soft. Hey, you okay? The child turned slowly. Not a boy, a girl, maybe 3 years old with blonde hair plastered to her head and blue eyes huge in a face too pale for living skin. She wore a pink jacket 2 sizes too small and shorts that barely covered her legs. No shoes, no socks. Her feet were purple from cold and her right wrist had a red mark like someone had grabbed her too hard. Mason's throat tightened. The girl looked exactly like the photographs his mother kept in a shoebox under her bed. The ones of Emma at 2 years old right before the meningitis. Same blonde hair, same blue eyes, same small frame that looked fragile enough to break. For a moment, Mason couldn't breathe. It was like seeing a ghost, like the universe had reached back through time and given him a second chance at the thing that had destroyed his family. "Where's your mom?" Mason asked, voice shaking. "Where do you live?" The girl's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She clutched something against her chest with both hands. A doll, cloth doll with button eyes and yarn hair, old and dirty, held like it was the only real thing in the world. Lightning cracked overhead, and in that brief white flash, Mason saw her clearly, saw the bruise on her wrist, saw the way her lips trembled, saw something in her face that stopped his heart because he knew that look. He'd seen it in the mirror the night Emma died. The look of a child who didn't understand why the safe places weren't safe anymore. "Okay," Mason said, forcing his voice to stay calm. "Okay, we're gonna find help." He crouched down, making himself smaller, less scary. "What's your name?" The girl stared at him with eyes that didn't blink enough. Then she lifted the doll slightly as if it could answer for her. Mason glanced up and down the road. No headlights, no parents running through the rain with flashlights, no neighbors searching, just storm and darkness and the sense that something was very wrong with this picture. Kids this young didn't wander miles in blackouts. They didn't end up in flooded roads alone unless someone put them there or someone failed to keep them safe. "Where do you live?" Mason asked again, softer. The girl lifted one small arm and pointed down the road, not toward the trailer park, toward the highway, toward the industrial section where the old factories sat empty and the roads turned to gravel and normal people didn't go after dark. Mason's pulse kicked up. That direction led nowhere good. Abandoned lots, condemned buildings, the kind of places Mason had learned to avoid because trouble lived there and trouble didn't ask your age before it broke your bones. "Okay," he said, trying to sound confident. "We'll figure it out." He stood and held out his hand. The girl looked at it for a moment. Then with painful slowness, she reached out and put her tiny freezing fingers in his palm. Her skin felt like ice wrapped in silk. Mason's chest ached. He scooped her up carefully, tucking her against him, turning his hoodie into a shield against the rain. The girl made a small sound, half sob, half relief. She pressed her face into his shoulder and clung with surprising strength. The doll squashed between them. Mason held her tight and started walking. The storm fought him every step. Wind shoved rain into his face at angles that defied physics. Water rushed over the pavement, pulling at his boots. Somewhere in the distance, a transformer exploded with a sound like a gunshot and sparks rained down in brief orange stars. Mason kept his head down and his arms locked around the child. She was so light it scared him. Like she hadn't been eating right, like she'd been small and forgotten long before tonight. He remembered Emma at this age before she got sick, the way she'd felt in his arms when he carried her to bed, the weight that wasn't quite there anymore. He made it 2 blocks before he felt it, that creeping sensation of being watched. Mason's instincts had been sharpened by years of dodging bullies and avoiding cops who saw poor kids as problems waiting to happen. He glanced back. Headlights. Far enough away that details blurred in the rain, but close enough to be deliberate. A vehicle moving slow, not searching frantically, not speeding through a storm, pacing. Mason's stomach dropped. He turned off the main road cutting between two trailers onto a narrow footpath most people didn't know existed. Mud sucked at his boots. Branches slapped his face. The girl whimpered and Mason whispered, "I got you. I got you." Behind him, the headlights slowed, then stopped. Engine idling, waiting. Mason pushed deeper into the maze of trailers and overgrown lots until he reached the back fence of the park. On the other side, a service road ran parallel to the highway. Broken asphalt and weeds and no lights for half a mile. He climbed the fence one-handed, the girl clutched against his chest and dropped down hard on the other side. His boots hit gravel and he stumbled, but kept her upright. She lifted her head, looked back toward the trailer park, and made a sound that wasn't crying. It was warning. Mason looked where she was looking. The headlights had reappeared, not at the main entrance. Somehow they'd circled around. Like whoever was driving knew exactly where Mason would run. His pulse hammered. He started moving faster, jogging now, rain and darkness, swallowing everything except the narrow strip of road ahead. In the distance, he saw a glow, dim and flickering. Generator light, maybe. A place still alive despite the blackout. He ran toward it. The service road curved and the glow resolved into a building. An old roadside diner with a neon sign that barely buzzed. The word open blinked weakly like a dying heartbeat. The parking lot was half flooded and empty except for one vehicle. A black SUV, engine running, parked at an angle like it had arrived in a hurry. Mason's relief died instantly. He slowed, breathing hard, the girl heavy in his arms now. Through the rain-streaked windshield of the SUV, he saw a dashboard light. Blue. Pulsing once, twice. Not standard. Not civilian. Law enforcement. But the vehicle had no markings. No unit number. No official insignia. Just black paint and tinted windows and that blue light hidden behind glass like a secret. Mason's mouth went dry. He backed up a step. The girl lifted her head and saw the SUV. Her body went rigid. She made that sound again. The warning sound. The diner door opened. Warm light spilled out onto the porch. A woman stepped outside, squinting into the storm. She was maybe 40. Apron tied around her waist, hair pulled back in a bun. She saw Mason, then she saw what he was holding. Her face changed instantly. Shock. Recognition. Then fear so sharp it looked like physical pain. "Oh my God," she whispered. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Where did you find her?" Before Mason could answer, the SUV's driver door opened. A man got out. Tall, broad shoulders, rain jacket that looked official even in the dark. He shut the door gently like he wasn't in any hurry at all. Then he raised his voice calm and clear. "Kid, put the child down and step away." Mason's heart slammed against his ribs. The girl clung, tighter fingers digging into his hoodie. The woman on the porch took one step forward, then stopped like an invisible wall held her back. Her eyes flicked between Mason and the man and the child. She looked terrified. Mason's brain tried to process. If this was a cop, if this was rescue, why did the girl react like prey seeing a predator? Why did the woman look like she wanted to scream but couldn't? The man walked closer, hands raised in a calming gesture that didn't match the hardness in his voice. "Easy," he called. "We're trying to help. Put the kid down." Mason shifted his stance, backing toward the edge of the lot. His boots sank into water, climbing over the curb. "I found her in the road," he said, voice rough. "She was alone." The man nodded like Mason had confirmed something useful. "Uh-huh. And you decided to take her." "I'm bringing her somewhere safe," Mason said. "Safe." The man repeated the word like it was funny. He took another step closer. "You know what's not safe? Random teenagers grabbing lost kids in the middle of a blackout." Mason's pulse hammered. "I didn't grab her. I found her." The woman on the porch spoke suddenly, voice too quick. He doesn't know. He's just a kid trying to help. The man's head snapped toward her. She cut herself off instantly, mouth closing like she'd been slapped. The man turned back to Mason. His eyes were flat, measuring. What's your name? Mason. Mason what? Mason hesitated. Giving his last name felt like handing over ammunition. The pause stretched too long and the man's eyes sharpened. The man smiled thinly. You don't want to tell me that's interesting. Lightning hit close enough to make the air crack. Thunder followed like the sky splitting open. The girl pressed her face into Mason's neck and whimpered. The man's eyes tracked her movement. That child's been reported missing, he said. You're making this worse. Mason stared at him, trying to read what kind of official he was. No full uniform, no visible badge, just the jacket, the radio clipped to his shoulder, the posture of someone used to being obeyed. Then call the police, Mason said. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. I am the police. He said it like that should end the conversation, like his word was law and questioning it was rebellion. But something in the way he said it made Mason's skin crawl. Real cops didn't need to announce it like that. Real cops had badges and backup and procedures. The woman on the porch whispered, please, just come inside. Her voice cracked, and Mason heard the plea under the words. Not come inside and wait for real help. Come inside before this gets worse. The man pulled a radio from his belt and spoke into it without taking his eyes off Mason. Subject located, roadside diner, County Service Road. Static answered. Then a voice distant and crackling. Copy, en route. Mason's stomach twisted. Backup was coming, and he still didn't know if that was good or bad. The girl lifted her head again. She looked past the man toward the far end of the lot where the tree line started. Mason followed her gaze. A figure stood in the shadows under the diner's awning, partially hidden behind a support post. For a moment, Mason thought it was just another person sheltering from the rain. Then lightning flashed. The figure wore a leather vest, dark, wet, and across the back, barely visible in that split second of light, a patch, curved text at the top, a symbol in the center, an iron skull over crossed pistons. The girl made a sound, not fear, something else. Recognition. Relief. She lifted the doll toward the figure like it was an offering, like it meant something important. The figure didn't move, but Mason felt the air shift, pressure changing, the way it does before something violent happens. The man in the police jacket saw the girl's movement. His smile faltered, then came back harder, forced. All right, he said, voice warmer now. Fake warm. Let's do this easy. Bring her here. We'll get her back to her father. Mason's chest tightened. Her father? Yeah, the man said. He's been looking for her. The woman on the porch flinched at the word father like it was a name she didn't want spoken out loud. Mason took another step back. The man's eyes narrowed. Listen, Mason said, trying to keep his voice steady. If she's missing, call the actual police. I'll wait inside. The man's jaw tightened. I am the actual police. But he didn't sound proud saying it. He sounded annoyed, like the lie was getting inconvenient. Mason's mouth went dry. He glanced at the SUV again. Blue light hidden behind tinted glass. No visible plates from this angle. No markings. And that other vehicle he'd sensed earlier. Still out there somewhere in the dark. The girl shifted in his arms, pressing her face into his shoulder. She didn't cry now. She went quiet. The way kids go quiet when crying doesn't work anymore. When they've learned that making noise only makes things worse. Mason had seen that silence before. In Emma's final days when the pain got too bad for even morphine to touch. When she stopped fighting because fighting took energy she didn't have. The woman whispered again desperately, please. Mason made a decision, not heroic, not smart, Just the only one that kept this child away from a man whose smile didn't reach his eyes and whose official status felt like a costume worn by someone playing dress-up. He turned and ran, not toward the road, toward the narrow gap between the diner and the tree line. Mud grabbed his boots. Water splashed up his jeans. The girl clung tight, her small body trembling against him. "Hey!" the man shouted, anger cracking through his calm. "Stop!" Mason didn't stop. He hit the tree line and pushed through branches, slapping his face, thorns catching his hoodie. The ground back here was chaos. Broken glass and gravel and rotting pallets stacked against the building. He nearly went down twice, but caught himself keeping the girl's head tucked against his chest. Behind him, the SUV's engine revved. Tires spun in mud. The man's voice carried muffled, but sharp. "He's behind the diner. He can't go far." Mason dropped low behind a heap of pallets and tried to catch his breath. The girl's fingers were fisted in his hoodie, her breathing fast and shallow. He whispered, "It's okay. We're okay." But he didn't believe it. Headlights burst through the rain as the SUV swung around the building, searching. Mason pressed himself flatter against the wet pallets. He could hear the man shouting into his radio, now coordinating with someone. Then another sound layered in, engines. Deeper, throatier, more than one. Motorcycles. Mason's heart tried to punch through his ribs. He risked a glance through the slats of the pallets. Down the service road, cutting through rain and darkness, 3 motorcycles rolled in without headlights. Just dim running lights like embers in the storm. They moved slow and controlled, not racing, not panicking, like they owned time itself. The riders wore leather vests, the same patch Mason had seen on the figure under the awning. Skull and pistons, clear now in the brief flashes of lightning. One bike stopped near the edge of the lot. Another circled behind the diner engine, growling low. The third stayed near the trees, a shadow watching shadows. The man by the SUV stepped out again, shoulders stiffening. He wasn't in control anymore, and he knew it. Mason's mind scrambled to understand. The girl, the patch, her father, the way the woman had recognized her with terror instead of relief. This wasn't a missing kid situation. This was territory. The girl shifted in Mason's arms, and her doll squeaked. A tiny sound from the old fabric, barely audible, but in the sudden quiet between thunder, it seemed too loud. One of the riders snapped his head toward the pallets. Mason froze. The rider got off his bike and started walking toward the tree line. He was tall, broad, moving carefully like he didn't want to slip, but would reach his destination no matter what. Water streamed off his leather vest. His boots hit puddles with purpose. Lightning flashed again, and Mason saw his face. Hard angles, a scar cutting through one eyebrow, pale eyes that didn't blink much. Not young, not old, somewhere in his 30s, with the kind of face that had seen violence and wasn't impressed by it anymore. The man in the police jacket called out, voice rising over the storm. "I've got him contained. We can do this clean." The biker didn't even look at him. He kept coming, eyes locked on the pallets. Mason's breath came shallow. He scanned for exits. Behind him, deeper woods and old fencing. To his left, a drainage ditch, swollen with floodwater. To his right, the diner's back wall and a service door he couldn't reach without being seen. The biker was getting closer, 20 feet, 15, 10. The girl stirred, lifting her head, and for the first time since Mason found her, she made a sound that was almost a word, broken and wet, but clear enough to understand. "Da." Mason's throat closed. His arms tightened around her, instinctively protective, even though he didn't understand what was happening. The biker stopped 5 feet away. Rain dripped off his hair, his vest heavy and dark with water. His gaze locked onto the girl's face, and something shifted in his expression. Shock, disbelief, Relief he didn't let himself feel yet, because relief was dangerous when things could still go wrong. Then he looked at Mason. "You find her?" he asked. His voice was low, rough, controlled. Mason nodded once. She was alone in the road. The biker's jaw tightened. He glanced past Mason toward the diner lot where the SUV idled, and the man in the jacket waited like he didn't know whether to fight or talk. "What's your name?" the biker asked. "Mason." "What did you do with her?" "I carried her," Mason said quickly. "That's it. She was in the road alone, and I brought her here." The biker studied him like he was weighing a decision that could ruin lives. "You hurt her." "No," Mason said immediately, voice firm despite his shaking. "I carried her, that's all." The girl lifted her doll again, holding it out toward the biker like a sacred object. The biker's eyes flicked to it, then back to Mason. Something in his expression cracked just barely. Not a smile, not softness, but recognition. "You run from that guy?" he asked, nodding toward the diner where the man in the jacket stood. Mason hesitated, then nodded. The biker's mouth tightened into something that wasn't a smile, more like approval sharpened into warning. "Good." Behind them, one of the other riders pulled up closer on his bike, stopping just short of the pallets. He stayed mounted, scanning the trees, scanning the diner, scanning everything like he expected bullets to come from the rain itself. His hand rested near his belt. Ready. The biker in front of Mason reached into his vest pocket, slowly, careful not to spook either Mason or the child. He pulled out a phone. The screen lit his face in harsh blue light that made the scar stand out like a brand. He spoke into it without taking his eyes off Mason. "Road captain to base. I've got eyes on her. Kid's safe." A pause. Rain hammered metal somewhere nearby. A gutter overflowing, the storm getting worse. Then his voice changed slightly, an edge creeping in. "Yeah, she's with the kid. Looks like he carried her." Another pause. "Doesn't look like he's lying." His gaze slid to the man by the SUV. His voice went colder. "And tell Grayson there's a unit out here that shouldn't be. Unmarked. Blue dash. Same setup as last time." Mason's blood went ice at those words. Same setup as last time. Meaning this had happened before. Meaning whoever was behind this had tried before. The biker ended the call and took one step closer. "You did the right thing," he said quietly, voice meant only for Mason. "But you're standing in a bad place holding the wrong kid." Mason swallowed hard. "Who is she?" The biker didn't answer directly. He tilted his head slightly and Mason turned to look. The man in the police jacket was walking closer through the rain, hands out like he was trying to look non-threatening, but he wasn't smiling anymore. Now he looked desperate, cornered. "All right," the man called, voice tight with forced authority. "Enough of this. Hand the child over. That's an order." The biker in front of Mason took a slow step sideways, placing his body between Mason and the approaching man. He didn't raise his voice, didn't threaten. He just stood there like a locked door that wouldn't open no matter how hard you pushed. The man stopped, rain dripping off his hair, off the fake badge on his belt that caught no light. "You don't understand what you're interfering with." The biker's gaze didn't move. "Oh," he replied, calm as a knife being drawn. "I understand exactly." The other biker behind them made a sound, metal clicking, subtle, fast, not dramatic, just the quiet noise of something being made ready. Mason's mouth went dry. The girl tightened her grip on his hoodie, and Mason felt how small she really was. How easily someone could take her. How easily this whole night could become something he never crawled out of. The man in the jacket leaned forward slightly, rain streaming off his jaw. "Last chance," he said, voice low now, meant only for them. "Give me the kid and you walk, keep playing hero and things get complicated." New headlights appeared at the edge of the lot, brighter than before, cutting through the storm like the night was being split open. And behind those lights, engines, many of them, deep and steady like thunder you couldn't outrun. They came in a line, spaced and steady, bright enough to bleach the rain white. The parking lot vibrated under Mason's feet as more motorcycles rolled in. Leather vests everywhere now, patches catching brief light, faces half hidden by rain and shadow. Some wore helmets, some didn't. None looked surprised to be here. Mason's hands went numb around the girl, not from cold anymore, from the realization that he'd walked into a world that didn't ask permission from anyone. A world that had its own rules and its own enforcement and its own way of handling problems that didn't involve calling 911. A truck rolled in behind the bikes, lifted suspension engine rumbling like distant artillery, black paint swallowing light. It stopped near the diner porch engine still running. The door opened, but nobody got out yet, just the threat of movement, the promise of more force if needed. The diner door cracked open again, and the woman stepped out, halfway clutching the frame like she was holding herself upright. She kept her gaze on the girl, not on the man in the jacket, not on the bikers, only on the child, like she couldn't afford to look at anything else. The man turned slowly, scanning the arrivals. Mason saw fear he was trying to hide, not panic, something more calculating. Like he was doing math in his head and not liking the answer. Like he was wondering if his backup would arrive in time or if he'd made a terrible mistake. The road captain's phone buzzed again. He checked it, face unreadable in the stormlight, then slid it away without speaking. A rider near the front of the formation dismounted and walked toward them. He didn't hurry. The rain could have been applause for how little he cared about it. Water ran off his vest, off his shoulders, off the brim of an invisible hat that wasn't there. Lightning flashed and Mason saw him clearly. Late 30s, maybe touching 40, thick neck, heavy shoulders that suggested he'd built muscle from work, not gyms. Beard trimmed close and neat despite the weather. Dark hoodie under his vest. Eyes that didn't waste time on hope or fear or any of the soft things that got people hurt. They landed on Mason, first scanning him like a problem to solve, then on the girl, and something tightened in his face. Something he forced back down so fast Mason almost missed it. Grief, raw and deep and carefully controlled. He stopped a few feet away from the road captain. "Which one of you called it in?" he asked, voice flat and authoritative. The road captain nodded once. "Me, Grayson." So this was Grayson. The name fit, hard and old-fashioned and uncompromising. Grayson's gaze flicked to the man in the jacket. "And who's that?" The man stepped forward, fast, too eager, like speaking first might save him. "Deputy name's Harlan. I was responding to a report of a missing child when this kid showed up with her and ran when I tried to approach." Grayson's expression didn't change. He looked at the man for a long moment like he was studying something under glass. Then he spoke one word. "Harlan." It wasn't a question. It was a filing, a categorization, a judgment already made. Deputy Harlan hesitated, thrown off by the lack of reaction, like he'd expected argument or negotiation and got neither. Grayson turned his attention to Mason. "Kid, set her down." Mason's arms tightened instinctively. The girl pressed her face against his neck. The road captain spoke, warning edge in his voice. "He ain't letting go because of what happened. Found her in the street. Ran from Harlan here." Grayson's eyes narrowed slightly. "Ran from law?" he asked Mason directly. Mason swallowed, forced himself to speak despite the fear clogging his throat. He didn't look like law, wasn't acting like it. A muscle jumped in Harlan's jaw. "He's lying. I identified myself. Told him to stop. He bolted. That's suspicious behavior." Grayson ignored Harlan completely, like he was background noise, irrelevant data. He stepped closer to Mason, stopping just outside arm's reach. "Look at me," he said. Mason did. He didn't want to, but something in that voice made disobedience feel impossible. Grayson's eyes dropped to the girl's wrist where the red mark showed against pale skin, then to her bare feet purple from cold cut from pavement, his mouth pressed into a thin line. "What's your name?" he asked Mason. "Mason. What did you do with her?" "I carried her," Mason said, voice steadier now. "That's it. She was in the road alone. I didn't know whose kid she was. I just knew she needed help." Grayson stared at him for a long second that felt like being weighed on a scale Mason couldn't see. Mason held his gaze because looking away felt like admitting guilt he didn't own. Then Grayson shifted his attention to the girl. She stared back, lip trembling. Not because of Mason now. Because the crowd, the engines, the rain, the adult voices shouting and metal clicking, and tension thick enough to choke on it was all too much for someone so small. She lifted her doll, holding it out toward Grayson the same way she had with the road captain. An offering, a recognition, a piece of evidence. Grayson's expression cracked just barely. He didn't smile. He didn't soften. But his eyes changed, like a door inside him opened a fraction and something human looked out. He reached out slowly and touched the doll's worn fabric with 2 fingers, like he was confirming it was real, like he was grounding himself in something tangible. Then he exhaled through his nose and said one quiet word that made the air shift. "Evelyn!" The girl made a small sound in response, almost a laugh, almost a sob. Something caught between relief and exhaustion, and she leaned forward as if pulled by gravity reaching for him. Mason's stomach dropped because that wasn't a random kid recognizing a stranger. That was a daughter recognizing her father. Grayson looked back at Mason. "You didn't take her from anywhere." "No," Mason said firmly. "I found her." Harlan tried again, forcing authority into his voice that was slipping away with every second. "This is a police matter. The child needs to be placed with proper authorities until we can verify identity and ensure she hasn't been harmed by this individual who, by his own admission, fled from law enforcement and refused multiple direct orders to stop." Grayson turned his head toward Harlan. Slow, deadly calm, the kind of calm that precedes violence. "You don't get to speak over me," he said softly. Harlan's eyes flashed. "Excuse me, I have jurisdiction here. You're obstructing an active investigation." Grayson stepped toward him, and it was like a line got drawn in the mud. A boundary crossed. 2 of the bikers behind him shifted stance, hands moving lower, ready for whatever came next. "I said," Grayson repeated, voice quieter now, more dangerous because of it, "you don't get to speak over me." Harlan held his ground, but his throat worked like he wanted to swallow his fear back down and couldn't quite manage it. "I have authority in this county. You can't just show up with your gang and intimidate law enforcement." Grayson tilted his head slightly, studying him. "You running dash cam on that unmarked SUV?" Harlan's face tightened. "It's an authorized vehicle for undercover work." "You got a unit number?" Harlan didn't answer fast enough. Grayson's eyes slid to the blue pulse on the dashboard, then back to Harlan. "You got a Warrant A report? Anything that explains why you're out here with lights hidden and backup supposedly en route but nowhere in sight?" Mason's chest went tight at the implication, at the suggestion that Harlan wasn't what he claimed to be. Harlan's voice rose, trying to outrun the questions. "The child is missing, and this boy took her, and I'm attempting to recover her safely and return her to her family, and you're interfering with that process." Grayson's hand shot out faster than Mason could track and grabbed Harlan's jacket front, yanking him forward hard enough that Harlan stumbled and nearly went down. Gasps came from the diner porch. A couple of bikers moved in closer without being told. The road captain's hand moved to his belt, but Grayson lifted one finger on his free hand, stopping him. Mason stood frozen, the girl in his arms watching. Grayson held Harlan up by his collar, faces inches apart. "You don't get to use my kid as a story," he said, low and brutal. "Not with me standing right here." Harlan's face flushed red. "Your kid, You can't just claim. Grayson's grip tightened, bunching the fabric under Harlan's chin. Yeah, mine. Evelyn Thorne, 3 years old, missing from my property 6 hours ago, and you just happened to be waiting at the exact spot where someone dropped her off. He released Harlan with a shove. Harlan staggered backward, catching himself against the SUV. His hand twitched toward his belt. Reflex, habit, threat. The rogue captain's voice cut through the rain like a razor. Don't! Harlan froze. His hand stopped moving. Everyone saw where it had been heading, where the weapon would be if he'd had the courage to reach for it. A biker near the tree line stepped forward enough for Mason to see the outline of something in his hand. Not raised, not threatening, just present. A reminder of mathematics, of how many guns they didn't have versus how many the bikers did. Grayson turned back to Mason. Bring her. Mason hesitated. Every instinct screamed that getting closer was a mistake, that handing over the girl meant losing the only leverage he had for his own safety. But the girl was reaching for Grayson now, making soft sounds, and Mason remembered Emma reaching for their mother in those final days. The way Mason had wanted to hold her forever but knew she needed their mom more. He took a careful step forward. Grayson didn't grab Evelyn immediately. He looked at Mason again, studying his face like he was searching for something hidden underneath. You got parents? He asked. My mom, Mason said. She's sick. Grayson nodded once, filing that away. You live in that park? Yeah. You weren't looking for trouble tonight. No. Trouble found you anyway, Grayson said. It wasn't a question. He finally reached out and took Evelyn from Mason with controlled gentleness that didn't match the violence he'd just shown Harlan. His hands were careful, practiced. The hands of someone who'd held this child 1,000 times before and knew exactly how she needed to be supported. Evelyn grabbed his hoodie and buried her face against his chest, breathing fast, then slower again. Like her body finally believed she'd survived, like the world had been tilted wrong for hours and someone had finally set it right. Grayson held her like it was the only real thing in the universe. Like if he let go, the ground would open up and swallow them both. Then he lifted his gaze to Mason again. His eyes were harder now, colder. You did good, he said, and it sounded like it cost him something to admit. But you're not walking away yet. Mason's stomach sank. What why? Grayson's eyes slid to Harlan, who was trying to edge toward his vehicle. Because somebody let my kid get out, and somebody tried to collect her like a package, and you're the only witness who isn't compromised. Mason looked at Harlan. Harlan stared back, face tight, jaw clenched, pretending he wasn't shaking inside, pretending he had cards left to play. The diner woman finally stepped off the porch, moving fast through the rain like she couldn't stand it anymore. She came toward them, hands out, eyes locked on Evelyn. Thank God, she whispered, voice breaking. Thank God she's alive. Grayson's gaze sharpened on her. You work here? Yes, she said quickly. My name's Tessa. I was gonna call. I tried, but the power went out and the phones died and I didn't know what to do. You recognized her, Grayson said. Not a question. Tessa's throat bobbed. She nodded. Everybody knows. People know who you are, who she is. And you knew she was missing. Her eyes darted toward Harlan, then away fast, like looking at him was dangerous. I heard. It was going around. Word spreads fast in storms like this when kids go missing. Grayson held Evelyn tighter, one hand cupping the back of her head. Who told you? Tessa swallowed hard. A man came in earlier, before the blackout hit. He asked questions about the back roads, about the trailer park, about whether the phones worked. He said he was looking for a lost child and wanted to know if anyone had seen her. Mason's skin crawled. Grayson's expression went cold and flat. What did the man look like? Tessa hesitated, glancing at Harlan again, like she was weighing whether speaking would cost her something she couldn't afford. It's all right. Grayson said, voice gentler. Just tell me. She took a shaky breath. Big, older than you, maybe 50. He had tattoos on his hands, heavy ones, and he wore a ring, like a skull but not like yours, different design. The road captain stepped in. That's not ours. Grayson nodded slowly. No, it ain't. Harlan forced a laugh that sounded like metal scraping stone. You're letting rumors and scared waitresses build conspiracy theories. This is simple. Kid was missing. I responded, he ran, I pursued. That's procedure. Grayson turned on him so fast Mason flinched. You were here too early, Grayson said, each word clipped and precise. That's what's bothering me. Power went out 20 minutes ago. You're already positioned at this specific diner on a back road nobody uses. How'd you know to be here? Harlan's mouth opened. Shut. Opened again. I was patrolling the area in an unmarked vehicle. Undercover operations. For what? What operation puts a deputy in an unmarked SUV on a dead-end service road during a blackout? Harlan's face went through several expressions. Calculation, defensiveness, fear. I don't have to explain operational details to civilians. Grayson looked at the road captain. Check the trees where that second vehicle was. I want eyes on it now. The road captain nodded and gestured. Two riders peeled off engines, starting headlights, cutting into the woods. They moved quiet and fast, disappearing into darkness. Grayson shifted Evelyn on his hip and looked at Mason again. You're coming inside. Mason blinked. What? Because you saw her first, Grayson said. You might be the only honest piece of this whole night. Mason's throat went tight. I just want to go home to my mom. Grayson's gaze didn't soften. Home's not safe if this isn't done right. Tessa whispered, please, just listen to him. Mason looked at Evelyn, now asleep against Grayson's chest like the storm finally couldn't reach her. He looked at the bikers forming a loose perimeter around them. At Harlan trapped between his vehicle and men who clearly didn't believe a word he said. Mason's voice came out rough. I didn't do anything wrong. I know, Grayson said. That's exactly why you're useful. The word useful made Mason's skin crawl, but he didn't see another option. Running now would look like guilt. Staying meant getting pulled deeper into something he didn't understand. They moved toward the diner together, Mason walking beside Grayson, the road captain behind them. Riders fanning out like a wall blocking Harlan from following too close. Harlan stayed near his SUV, jaw clenched, watching like he was memorizing faces for a report he'd never get to file. Inside the diner, warmth hit like a wave. The smell of burnt coffee and grease and desperation. A generator hummed somewhere in the back, keeping the lights on, keeping the refrigerators running. A few locals sat frozen in booze, coffee cups halfway to mouths, staring like they'd just watched the world change and didn't know how to process it. The older couple in the corner booth, the truck driver at the counter, the young woman with a baby asleep in a carrier beside her, all of them watching with wide eyes as Grayson carried Evelyn through the door with an entourage of leather and steel. Grayson walked to the far booth, the one with the best view of both doors, and sat carefully. He kept Evelyn against him, adjusting her weight so she could sleep properly. Then he pointed across the table at Mason. Sit. Mason sat. His hands were still shaking. He tried to stop them and couldn't. Grayson leaned forward slightly, eyes locked on Mason's face with an intensity that felt like being read. Start from the beginning, every detail, where you found her, what time, who you saw, which way you ran, why you ran, everything. Mason opened his mouth to speak. From outside through the storm and the diner's thin walls, a muffled thud sounded. Then another. Not thunder, something heavier, more deliberate. The door swung open, letting a sheet of rain blow in. One of the riders stepped inside, soaked to the bone, breathing hard. Water dripped from his vest onto the tile floor. We found the second car, he said. Grayson didn't blink, didn't move, just waited. The rider's gaze flicked to Mason, then back to Grayson. It's empty. Silence fell over the diner like a physical weight. Still warm, the rider added. The diner went silent in a way Mason could feel in his teeth, in his bones, in the sudden tightness of his chest that made breathing difficult. Still warm meant the driver hadn't gone far, meant whoever had been in that vehicle was close, watching, waiting. The silence in the diner pressed down on Mason like water, too heavy, too complete. Even the generator's hum seemed quieter now, like the machine itself was holding its breath. Grayson sat across from him with Evelyn asleep against his chest, one arm wrapped around her protectively. His other hand rested on the table fingers, drumming once, twice, then stopping. The only sign of tension in an otherwise perfectly controlled exterior. Mason watched those fingers and thought about his own father. The way Dad's hands had looked after 12-hour shifts at the plant. Scarred knuckles, chemical burns from the cleaning solutions, calluses that never healed because the work never stopped. Grayson's hands had different scars, the kind that didn't come from factory work. Tell me, Grayson said again. Mason swallowed and started talking. He told Grayson about walking home from the store, about his mother and the medicine, about the blackout hitting and finding Evelyn in the road. Every detail he could remember, even the small ones that seemed irrelevant. The way Evelyn had pointed toward the highway when he asked where she lived. The sound she'd made when she saw Harlan's SUV. The warning sound. Mshan. Grayson listened without interrupting. His expression gave nothing away, but Mason could feel him processing, categorizing, building something in his head. When Mason got to the part about running behind the diner, Grayson's eyes sharpened. You saw anyone in the trees before the bikes showed up? Grayson asked. No, Mason said. Just the car, the one with the engine still warm. I saw the parking spot, but not who was in it. But you felt someone there. It wasn't a question, but Mason nodded anyway. Yeah, I felt watched. Grayson nodded like that confirmed something. He looked toward the window where rain still hammered against glass. The man Tessa described, tattoos on his hands. Skull ring, you see him? No. But Harlan was already here waiting. Yeah, Grayson's jaw flexed. He looked at the road captain who stood near the counter, eyes constantly scanning the parking lot through the windows. Rhett, how many outside now? Rhett didn't turn from his observation post. 14, 2 watching the road, 4 on Harlan. Rest spread out covering approaches. 14 armed bikers in a storm surrounding a small diner. Mason's mind couldn't quite grasp the scale of what he'd stumbled into. Grayson shifted Evelyn slightly, checking her breathing, making sure she was still comfortable. Then his voice went quiet. Mason, you got siblings. The question hit harder than it should have. Mason's throat closed up. Had a sister, Emma. She died when she was 2. Grayson's eyes met his, and for the first time Mason saw something human there. Not sympathy exactly, understanding. The kind of understanding that only comes from shared loss. How? Grayson asked softly. Meningitis. Took her fast, 3 days from first fever to... Mason couldn't finish the sentence. Grayson nodded slowly. My wife, Claire, died a year ago. The words hung between them. 2 strangers connected by the people they couldn't save. How? Mason asked before he could stop himself. Grayson's expression went flat again. Closed. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong enemies. Before Mason could ask what that meant, Tessa appeared beside the table with 2 cups of coffee. She set them down carefully, hands shaking. Thought you might need this. Grayson looked up at her. You said the man who came in asked about phones. What else did he want to know? Tessa wrapped her arms around herself. He asked if I'd seen any kids. Said his daughter ran off during a family camping trip. Asked if there were any places nearby where a scared child might hide. What did you tell him? I said I hadn't seen anyone. Told him about the trailer park and the old industrial lots. He seemed really interested in the industrial area, asked how to get there from here. Grayson's fingers started drumming again. He paid cash. Yeah, left a good tip too. $50 on a $6 meal. The road captain turned from the window. That's wrong. Nobody tips that high unless they're buying silence or trying to be remembered. Or both, Grayson said. He looked at Tessa. Anything else, any detail you can remember. Tessa thought hard, forehead creasing. He limped, right leg. Not bad, but noticeable. And he kept checking his phone like he was waiting for a message. Mason's stomach dropped. Harlan was on his phone when I first saw him at the SUV, before he saw me. Grayson's eyes narrowed, coordinating. The door opened again and the two riders who'd gone to check the second vehicle came back inside, dripping water everywhere. One of them carried something in his hand. He walked straight to Grayson and set it on the table. A phone, cheap flip phone, the kind you buy at gas stations with prepaid minutes. Burner. Found it in the car, the rider said. Last call was outgoing, 20 minutes ago. Grayson picked up the phone and flipped it open. He scrolled through the call log, his expression darkened. Same number called 5 times tonight. Most recent was 18 minutes ago. He looked at Harlan through the window. The deputy was still standing by his SUV, pretending he wasn't trapped. Rhett, check Harlan's phone. Rhett walked outside. Through the window, Mason watched him approach Harlan and hold out his hand. Harlan argued, gesturing angrily, but Rhett didn't move. Just stood there waiting with infinite patience until Harlan finally reluctantly pulled out his phone and handed it over. Rhett checked it, then came back inside and nodded to Grayson. 18 minutes ago, outgoing call. Grayson set the burner phone down carefully. They were talking to each other. Tessa made a small sound. Harlan and that man, yeah, Mason's mind raced. So Harlan's not just a dirty cop. He's working with whoever took Evelyn. Grayson didn't answer. He was looking at his daughter sleeping peacefully now, unaware of the storm of violence and betrayal swirling around her. One of the locals in the booths finally spoke up, the older man who'd been nursing coffee and pretending not to listen. Grayson, maybe it's time to call the state boys. Let them sort this. Grayson looked at him. You trust them to do it right. The old man shifted uncomfortably. More than I trust what happens if you don't. This is my kid, Grayson said quietly. My responsibility. I'm not handing it over to people who might be compromised. You think state police are compromised? The old man asked him. I think information travels. I think calls get monitored. I think the moment I involve official channels, whoever's behind this knows exactly what we know and what we don't. Grayson's voice stayed calm but absolute. So no, not yet. The old man subsided, shaking his head but not arguing further. Mason looked at Grayson. What happens now? Now, Grayson said, we find out who's really pulling strings and we make sure it never happens again. He stood carefully, settling Evelyn into the booth seat where she curled up without waking. He gestured to one of the riders. Stay with her. Anyone tries anything, you know what to do. The rider nodded and took up position at the end of the booth, arms crossed, eyes alert. Grayson looked at Mason. You're coming with me. Where? To talk to Harlan, properly this time. Mason's stomach flipped. I don't think I should. You're the only one he might slip up around, Grayson interrupted. Because you're not what he expected, not part of my crew, just a kid who did the right thing. That makes you dangerous to him in ways he hasn't prepared for. Before Mason could argue further, Grayson was already walking toward the door. Mason looked at Evelyn sleeping peacefully, at the rider standing guard at Tessa, who gave him an encouraging nod. Then he got up and followed. Outside, the rain had lessened to a steady drizzle. The storm was passing, but the damage remained. Flooded parking lot, fallen branches, the smell of ozone and wet earth. Harlan stood by his SUV looking like a cornered animal. His eyes darted between the bikers surrounding him. calculating distances, looking for gaps that didn't exist. Grayson approached slowly. Mason stayed 2 steps behind, heart pounding. Deputy Harlan, Grayson said pleasantly, we need to have a conversation. Harlan's chin lifted. I don't have to talk to you without my lawyer present. That's your right, Grayson agreed. But see, here's the thing. You're not under arrest. You're not being detained. You're just standing in a parking lot having a conversation with concerned citizens. So there's no need for lawyers yet. The word yet hung in the air like a threat. Harlan's jaw clenched. What do you want? I want to know who you called 18 minutes ago. I don't know what you're talking about. Grayson pulled out the burner phone. This was in the abandoned car. It called your number. Your number called it back. You want to explain that coincidence? Harlan's face went through several emotions. Fear, calculation, defiance. I call a lot of numbers in the course of my duties. I can't remember every single... Who took my daughter? Grayson's voice cut through the excuse like a blade. I don't know. Who told you to be here tonight? Nobody. I was patrolling, and who told you to be here? Harlan's composure cracked. You can't prove anything. You're harassing a law enforcement officer, and I will have every single one of you arrested for obstruction. And Grayson moved fast. He grabbed Harlan's collar and slammed him back against the SUV hard enough that the metal dented. Bikers moved in closer, forming a tight circle. Mason couldn't see the parking lot entrance anymore. Couldn't see anything except leather and rain and Harlan's face going pale. My daughter, Grayson said, voice soft and terrible, was taken from my home. Someone got past my security. Someone knew exactly when to move. Someone coordinated drop-off and pick-up. And you were waiting here like you knew exactly when she'd arrive. Harlan tried to speak, couldn't. Grayson's forearm was across his throat now, not choking, but close. I'm going to ask one more time, Grayson said. And if you lie to me again, we're going to find out how waterproof that ditch behind the diner really is. Mason's blood ran cold. That wasn't metaphor. That was threat. Harlan's eyes bulged. He gasped out words. I can't. Grayson eased the pressure slightly. Can't or won't. He'll kill me, Harlan whispered. If I talk, he'll kill me. And if you don't talk, Grayson said quietly, I'll kill you. So you're dead either way. Might as well die having done one decent thing. Harlan's resistance broke. Mason watched it happen. Watched the moment when a man decides survival isn't worth the price anymore. Dalton? Harlan gasped. Dalton Cross. Grayson went very still. Say that again. Dalton Cross. He's the one who took your daughter. He's the one who paid me to coordinate. He's the one who's been planning this for months. The name meant something. Mason could see it in the way every biker within earshot tensed, the way Rhett's hand moved toward his belt, the way Grayson's face went from controlled anger to something colder. Dalton, Grayson repeated slowly. Yeah, Dalton who rode with us 5 years ago. That Dalton. Harlan nodded frantically. He came to me 6 months ago. Said he wanted revenge for what you did. Said you let his son die. Said he'd pay me $50,000 to help him take your daughter and make you suffer. Mason's mind reeled. This wasn't random crime. This was personal, planned revenge. Grayson released Harlan, stepping back. His hands were shaking now. Not from fear, from rage so intense it was taking everything he had to contain it. Where is he now? Grayson asked. I don't know. We were supposed to meet at the industrial lots after I got the kid from whoever found her. Make it look like a rescue, get footage of me being the hero, but then you showed up and everything went sideways. The industrial lots, Grayson said, where specifically the old steel plant, Building 3, he set up cameras there, was going to film everything, make a whole production out of it. Grayson looked at Rhett. You know where that is? Yeah. How many men you think he's got? Harlan swallowed. I don't know. He had at least 4 when I met with him last week. Could be more now. Grayson nodded slowly, processing. Then he looked at Mason. You still want to go home? Mason thought about his mother waiting, about the trailer with the broken lock, about Evelyn sleeping inside because someone wanted to use her as a weapon. No, Mason said, I want to help. Grayson studied him for a long moment. You know what that means. Not really, Mason admitted, but I know Evelyn's safe because of dumb luck. And I know if we don't stop this guy, he'll try again. And next time, maybe the kid who finds her won't bring her here. Something shifted in Grayson's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition of someone who understood what was at stake. All right, Grayson said. He turned to Rhett. Take Mason and 2 riders. Go to his trailer. Check on his mother. Make sure she's safe. Bring her here if necessary. Mason's heart jumped. You think they'd go after her? I think Dalton's been watching you since you found Evelyn, Grayson said. And I think desperate men do desperate things. The words hit like cold water. Mason hadn't thought about his mother being in danger, hadn't considered that helping Evelyn might have painted a target on his family. Rhett gestured to 2 riders. Let's move. They headed for the bikes. Mason climbed on behind Rhett, holding on tight as the engine roared to life. As they pulled out of the lot, Mason looked back at the diner, at Grayson standing in the rain, staring at Harlan like he was deciding something that couldn't be undone, at Evelyn sleeping safely inside, surrounded by men who would die before they let anyone take her again. The ride to the trailer park took 4 minutes. The roads were still flooded, still dangerous, but Rhett navigated like he'd done this 1,000 times. The 2 other riders flanked them, forming a protective triangle. When they reached Cottonwood Lane, Mason's stomach dropped. His trailer's front door was open, not just unlocked, standing wide open, light spilling out onto the muddy yard. No, Mason breathed. Rhett brought the bike to a hard stop. Stay here. But Mason was already off, running toward the trailer, fear crushing his lungs. Mom! He hit the steps and burst through the door. The living room was chaos. Furniture overturned, lamp broken on the floor. His mother's oxygen tank knocked over, but still hissing. And in the kitchen on the floor, his mother. She sat with her back against the cabinet's wrist, zip-tied in front of her mouth, covered with duct tape. Her eyes were open, terrified but alive. Tears streaked her face. Mason fell to his knees beside her. Mom, I'm here. He ripped the tape off her mouth as gently as he could. She gasped, sobbing. Mason. Oh God, Mason. I'm here. You're okay. You're gonna be okay. Red appeared in the doorway, taking in the scene. He pulled a knife from his belt and cut the zip ties quickly, professionally. Sarah Reed grabbed Mason and held him so tight it hurt. She was shaking violently, words tumbling out between sobs. A man, he came in, said things about you, about the little girl, said you were involved in something bad and I needed to understand what kind of son I raised. Mason's blood turned to ice. What did he look like? Big, older, he had tattoos all over his hands, and a ring, a skull ring. Dalton. He'd been here, in Mason's home, threatening his dying mother. Did he hurt you? Mason asked, checking her for injuries. No, he just tied me up and left. Said I should sit and think about what my boy's gotten himself into. Rhett spoke from the doorway. We need to move. If he came here once, he might come back. Sarah looked at the biker with fear and confusion. Who are you people? Friends of your son, Rhett said simply. We're here to help. Mason helped his mother to her feet. She was weak, unsteady on legs that barely worked anymore. The cancer had eaten so much of her strength. Pack what you need, Mason said. Medicine, clothes, we're leaving. Leaving Mason, what's happening? Who was that man? What have you gotten into? I found a little girl, Mason said. A little girl who was lost. And it turns out some very bad people don't want her found. His mother stared at him. Then, despite everything, despite the terror and confusion, she nodded. Like Emma. Yeah, Mason whispered. Like Emma. She cupped his face with trembling hands. Then we help her, whatever it takes. Mason's throat closed up. He nodded, unable to speak. Rhett helped gather essentials while the other two riders checked the perimeter. Within 5 minutes, they had Sarah's medications, some clothes, and the old photo album she kept under her bed. They loaded her into a truck that had arrived while Mason was inside. One of the riders must have called for it. Sarah sat in the backseat oxygen tank beside her, looking small and fragile and scared, but trying to be brave for her son. Mason climbed onto Rhett's bike again, and they headed back to the diner. On the way, Mason's mind raced. Dalton had been in his home, had threatened his mother. This wasn't about Evelyn anymore. It was about sending a message, about making Grayson feel powerless by hurting everyone around him. And Mason was now in the crossfire. When they pulled into the diner parking lot, Grayson was waiting outside. He saw Sarah in the truck and his expression softened slightly. "She okay?" he asked Mason. Shaken, Dalton was there. Grayson's jaw clenched. He leave a message. Just tied her up and left. Told her to think about what I'd gotten into. Psychological warfare, Grayson said. He wants you scared. Wants you to blame yourself for bringing danger home. Mason looked at him. "Isn't that what I did?" "No," Grayson said firmly. "You saved my daughter. What Dalton does in response is on him, not you." Tessa came out of the diner and helped Sarah inside, getting her settled in a booth with coffee and blankets. The locals had cleared out, leaving just bikers and the few people directly involved. Grayson sat across from Mason again. Evelyn was awake now, sitting beside her father, eating crackers that Tessa had brought. She looked at Mason and smiled shyly. "Thank you," she whispered. Her first real words since Mason found her. Mason's heart clenched. "You're welcome." Grayson watched the exchange. Then he spoke quietly so only Mason could hear. "Dalton Cross used to be my best friend. We built this club together. Rode together for 15 years. He had a son named Tyler, 8 years old, good kid, loved baseball." Mason listened, sensing this was important. 3 years ago, Grayson continued, Tyler got sick, rare form of leukemia, treatable but expensive. Dalton came to me asking for money, $50,000 for experimental treatment. I said no. "Why?" Mason asked before he could stop himself. Grayson's eyes were distant. "Because Dalton owed debts to a rival club. Bad debts. And I knew any money I gave him would go straight to them to keep him alive. I told him to sell his bikes, sell his house. Do whatever it took, but don't come to the club for money that would fund our enemies." Mason's stomach sank. What happened? Tyler died 6 months later. The regular treatment wasn't enough. He needed the experimental drugs. And Dalton blamed me, said I chose club politics over a child's life. "Did you?" Mason asked quietly. Grayson was silent for a long moment. "I made a call. The call I thought was right for the club, for the greater good. But Dalton's right about one thing. Tyler died because I said no." The admission hung between them. After Tyler's funeral, Grayson continued, Dalton left the club, disappeared. I thought he'd moved away to grieve. Didn't know he'd been planning this. Mason looked at Evelyn munching crackers, oblivious to the darkness swirling around her. "He wants you to feel what he felt when Tyler died." "Yeah. What are you going to do?" Grayson's eyes hardened. "I'm going to end this. Tonight." He stood and called Rhett over. They spoke in low tones, Grayson giving instructions. Rhett nodded and started organizing riders. Mason watched, feeling like events were moving faster than he could track. Within minutes, the plan was set. A dozen riders would go to the industrial lots, confront Dalton, end the threat. Grayson looked at Mason. "You stay here with Evelyn and your mother. Rhett will leave guards. You'll be safe." "What about you?" Mason asked. "I'll handle Dalton." "How?" Grayson's expression was unreadable. "However I have to." Mason stood up. "I'm coming with you." "No." "Yes," Mason insisted. "He was in my house. He threatened my mom. This isn't just about you and Evelyn anymore. Grayson studied him. You understand what you're asking, where we're going, things might get ugly. I understand, Mason said, though he wasn't sure he did. Grayson looked at Sarah, who had been listening. Ma'am, your son wants to come with us. I need your permission. Sarah looked at Mason with eyes that had seen too much loss. You really want to do this? Yeah, Mason said, I do. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Okay, but you come back to me. You hear, you come back. Mason hugged her tight. I will, I promise. Grayson gestured toward the door. Let's move. They headed outside into the breaking storm. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from everything. The world smelled clean and dangerous. Mason climbed onto a bike behind one of the riders. The convoy formed up. 14 motorcycles and 2 trucks, headlights cutting through the wet darkness. And they rode toward the industrial lots where Dalton waited with his cameras and his rage and his need to make someone pay for a grief that would never heal. The old steel plant loomed out of the darkness like a monument to dead industry. 4 massive buildings, windows, broken walls streaked with rust and graffiti. The fence around the property had been cut years ago and never repaired. The convoy stopped at the perimeter, engines cut out one by one until only silence remained. Grayson stood at the front looking at the buildings. Building 3, he said. That's where Harlan said Dalton set up. Rhett pointed. That one, third from the left. They could see light inside. Generator powered. Someone was definitely there. Grayson turned to his riders. 2 teams. Rhett takes 6 and circle around back. Block any exits. I'll take the rest through the front. We go quiet until contact. Then we adapt. The riders nodded, checking weapons. Mason's heart pounded. This was real. This was happening. Grayson looked at Mason. You stay with my group. Stay behind me. If shooting starts, you hit the ground and you stay down. Understand? Mason nodded, mouth too dry to speak. They moved forward. The building's main entrance was a massive loading bay with the door rolled halfway up. Light spilled out underneath. They could hear voices inside. At least 2 people, maybe more. Grayson held up a fist. Everyone stopped. He gestured and they spread out, flanking the entrance. Then Grayson walked forward alone and ducked under the door. Mason followed before he could think better of it. Inside was a large open space that had once been a factory floor. Most of the equipment was gone, leaving just concrete and pillars and shadows. In the center, someone had set up a makeshift studio, camera on a tripod, lights on stands, a chair facing the camera. And standing beside the camera, watching them enter with no surprise at all, was Dalton Cross. He was big, 50-something with gray in his beard. Tattoos covered both hands and crawled up his forearms. The skull ring on his right hand caught the light, and he was smiling. Grayson, Dalton said warmly, right on time. I was starting to think Harlan hadn't gotten through to you. Grayson stopped 20 feet away. Dalton, you brought the whole crew. I'm flattered. Where are your people? Around, Dalton said vaguely. He gestured at the setup. Like it, I thought about just killing your kid. Quick, clean. But that felt too easy, too fast. You wouldn't really feel it, not the way I felt it. Grayson's voice stayed level. Tyler? Yeah, Tyler, my boy, who died because you chose politics over his life. I made a call, a bad one, I own that. Dalton's smile faded. You own it, that's good, that's a start. But ownership doesn't bring him back. Doesn't undo 3 years of grief. Doesn't fill the hole he left. No, Grayson agreed. It doesn't. So I decided to give you a hole. Let you carry something that won't heal. But see, killing Evelyn would be too quick. She's 3. She wouldn't understand. Just confused and scared and then gone. Where's the lesson in that? Grayson's hands clenched into fists. No, Dalton continued. I wanted you to see her in danger. To follow to feel helpless, to wonder if tonight was the night you'd lose everything. And then maybe when you were truly broken, I'd let her go. Let you live with the fear that I could come back anytime, that your little girl would never be safe as long as I was breathing. Psychological torture, Grayson said. Payback, Dalton corrected. You taught me everything I know about power, Grayson, about control, about making people understand their place in the world. I'm just using your lessons. Mason couldn't stay silent anymore. Tyler wouldn't want this. Dalton's eyes snapped to him. Who the fuck are you? Mason Reed, I found Evelyn. I brought her to safety. Dalton studied him. The kid, Harlan mentioned you, said you were a complication. I'm not part of this, Mason said. I just found a little girl in the rain. And now you're here in the middle of it. That's funny how that works, isn't it? You do one good thing and suddenly you're neck deep in someone else's war. Mason thought about Emma, about his mother dying, about all the ways good intentions led to pain. I know about losing someone, Mason said. My sister died when she was 2. I know what it does, how it breaks you. But hurting other people won't bring them back. Dalton's expression flickered. You think I don't know that? Then why do this? Because the world is supposed to be fair. Dalton's voice cracked. My son was good, kind, innocent. He didn't deserve to die, and Grayson had the power to save him and chose not to. Grayson spoke quietly. I was wrong, Dalton. I've said it. I'll say it 1,000 times. I was wrong. Tyler deserved better. You deserve better. I failed you both. Dalton stared at him. Say it again. I was wrong. Again. I was wrong. I chose wrong. And your son died because of it. Dalton's eyes filled with tears. He was 8 years old. I know. He wanted to be a pitcher. Had a good arm. Coach said he could go far. I remember. I failed him, Grayson. I couldn't save my own kid. Grayson took a step closer. You didn't fail him. The cancer failed him. The world failed him. And I failed him. But you loved him, and you fought for him, and that's all any father can do. Dalton's face crumpled. He sank into the chair, head in his hands. The skull ring glinted as he covered his eyes. I just wanted him back, Dalton whispered. I just wanted my boy back. Grayson crossed the distance and knelt beside the chair. He put a hand on Dalton's shoulder. I know, Grayson said. God, I know. I lost Claire, lost the woman I loved. And every day I wake up and she's still gone. There's no fixing it, no making it right, just learning to live with the whole. Dalton looked up at him with red eyes. How? I don't know yet, Grayson admitted. But I have Evelyn, and she needs me to figure it out. Same way Tyler needed you to figure it out. But he's gone. Yeah, he is, and nothing changes that, but you're still here. And what you do now, that's his legacy. That's what he leaves behind in you. Dalton's hands shook. I'm so tired, Grayson, so tired of being angry. I know. I don't know how to stop. We'll figure it out. Together, like we used to. Dalton looked at him for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. Okay. Movement erupted from the shadows. 3 men stepped out with guns raised. Dalton's security hidden and waiting. Boss, one of them said, we still doing this? Dalton stood slowly. He looked at the men, then at Grayson, then at Mason. For a moment, the whole world balanced on a knife's edge. Then Dalton shook his head. No, we're done. Pack it up. The men looked confused. But the plan's over, Dalton said firmly. We're leaving. One of the men, younger and more aggressive, stepped forward. Fuck that. We came here to send a message, to make them pay. I'm not leaving without... The gunshot was deafeningly loud in the enclosed space. The young man stumbled backward, hand clutching his shoulder where blood bloomed. He went down hard. Dalton held the gun steady, aimed at his own man. I said, we're done. The other 2 men slowly lowered their weapons. Understood. Rhett and the other bikers who'd been holding position in the shadows moved in, securing the gunmen quickly and efficiently. Mason stood frozen ears ringing from the gunshot, trying to process what just happened. Grayson looked at Dalton. You didn't have to shoot him. Yeah, I did, Dalton said quietly, because he wouldn't have stopped. Would have come after Evelyn on his own. This ends tonight, all of it. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Someone had called the cops. Real cops this time. Dalton smiled sadly. That'll be for me. Grayson shook his head. You can run. We'll cover you. No, Dalton said. I'm done running, done hiding. I kidnapped a child, threatened people, shot one of my own guys. I need to face that. Dalton? It's okay, Dalton interrupted. Really, it's time. Maybe in prison I can figure out how to be someone Tyler would be proud of. The sirens were close now, lights flashing through the broken windows. Grayson grabbed Dalton and pulled him into a hug. I'm sorry for all of it. Dalton hugged him back. Me too. They broke apart as state troopers flooded into the building, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Dalton raised his hands and dropped to his knees. I'm the one you want. Dalton Cross. I'm responsible for the kidnapping of Evelyn Thorne. The troopers swarmed him, cuffing him quickly. They shouted at Grayson and the bikers to get down, but Grayson stayed standing. These men helped rescue my daughter, Grayson said calmly. We're the victims here, and witnesses. A state police captain approached, looking skeptical but cautious. Mr. Thorne? Yeah, your daughter's safe. Yes, at the diner on County Road 6. The captain nodded. We'll need statements from everyone. You'll get them, but first I need to see my kid. The captain hesitated, then nodded. Go, we'll catch up with you there. Grayson turned and walked out. Mason followed, legs shaking with adrenaline crash. Outside the building, riders were mounting up. The convoy reformed. They rode back to the diner through wet streets and clearing skies. The storm had passed completely now, stars visible through breaking clouds. At the diner, Evelyn ran to Grayson the moment he walked in. He scooped her up and held her like he'd never let go. Sarah Reed sat with Atessa, both women crying with relief as Mason came through the door unharmed. Mason went to his mother and held her. She smelled like hospital and home, and everything he was terrified of losing. It's over, he whispered. It's over. Hours later, after statements had been given and paperwork started, Mason sat outside the diner watching the sunrise. Grayson came out and sat beside him. They didn't speak for a while. Finally, Grayson said, The lawyer I mentioned, for your mom, offer still stands. Mason looked at him. Why? Because you saved my daughter when you didn't have to. Because you're a good kid in a shitty situation. Because I can help, and it costs me nothing but means everything to you. Mason's throat tightened. I don't want charity. It's not charity, it's debt paid. You gave me my daughter back. Let me give you your mother, at least a fighting chance for her. Mason thought about Sarah's pale face, the way she struggled to breathe. The countdown timer nobody talked about, but everyone knew was running. Okay, he said. Thank you. Grayson nodded. He stood to go inside, then paused. One more thing. When you're older, if you ever want to ride with us, there's a place for you. Mason looked at the bikers loading up, preparing to leave. At the Leather and Steel and Brotherhood. I appreciate that, Mason said honestly, but I don't think that's my path. What is your path? Mason thought about Emma, about finding Evelyn, about the way helping one small person had changed everything. I think I want to help people, maybe become a nurse or something, work in hospitals, give kids like Emma better chances. Grayson smiled. That's a good path. Tyler would have liked you. Yeah, he wanted to help people too, always talking about being a doctor when he grew up. They sat in comfortable silence watching the sun climb higher. Inside the diner, Evelyn laughed at something Tessa showed her. The sound carried through the open door like a promise that good things still existed in the world. 6 months later, Mason stood in the hospital corridor watching through a window as his mother slept. The treatments had worked better than anyone expected. The tumors were shrinking. She'd gained weight, Color had returned to her face. The doctors called it remarkable. Mason called it a miracle funded by Grayson Thorne's lawyer and his guilt and his strange sense of honor. Mason had visited Grayson and Evelyn twice in those 6 months. Once for Evelyn's 4th birthday, where she'd given him a drawing of the two of them holding hands in the rain. Once for a barbecue where Grayson's entire extended family had treated Mason like he belonged. It was weird, good weird, but weird. Mason's phone buzzed, a text from Grayson. "How's Sarah?" Mason typed back. "Good, really good. Glad to hear it. Evelyn asks about you. Tell her hi from me. Come by this weekend. She wants to show you her new bike." Mason smiled. "It's not a motorcycle, right? Training wheels. I'm not that crazy. See you Saturday." Mason pocketed his phone and went back into his mother's room. She opened her eyes as he sat down. "Hey, baby," she said, voice stronger than it had been in years. "Hey, Mom, you hear from your friend." She meant Grayson. She called him Mason's friend despite the age difference in the circumstances because she didn't know what else to call a motorcycle club president who'd saved her life. "Yeah, invited me over this weekend." Sarah smiled. "You should go. That little girl adores you." "I will." She reached out and took his hand. "I'm proud of you. You know that. I didn't do anything special. You did the right thing when it would have been easier to walk away. That's everything, Mason. That's the whole world." Mason squeezed her hand throat tight with emotion. Through the window, he could see the city stretching out in an afternoon light. Somewhere out there, Dalton Cross sat in a prison cell trying to make peace with his ghosts. Somewhere, Harlan was awaiting trial for corruption and kidnapping. Somewhere, Tyler's grave held flowers that Dalton's sister brought every week. And somewhere in a house with a yard in security that actually worked, a little girl named Evelyn Thorne played with dolls and forgot the night she'd been lost in a storm. But Mason would never forget. Because that night had taught him something essential, that small choices mattered, that doing the right thing was sometimes the scariest thing, that families could be made from strangers connected by crisis, that sometimes saving someone else was the only way to save yourself. His mother drifted back to sleep and Mason sat holding her hand, watching her breathe, counting each breath as the gift it was. And outside the window, storm clouds gathered again on the horizon because weather didn't care, and life kept moving, and tomorrow would bring its own battles. But today, right now, everyone he loved was safe, and that was enough.